Everybody, just about one more minute, and then we'll get started. Thanks. I think there's still may still have some folks joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. This is Innovative E's Amazing Project Management Solutions for Healthcare, Manufacturing, and Government. This is the first of a four-part series. This is really an introduction to all those different vertical industries. We've got some interesting things to talk about today. We're going to make this a little bit interactive. So Pamela is our moderator, and she is going to start a recording now of the presentation. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. If those of you who are not familiar with GoToWebinar, a couple things, there's a lot of stuff on this slide, but the main things you need to know are there's a little hand right here. Oops. Let's go back to my annotation, and there's a little hand here you can raise. If you have any questions, you can post questions into the dialog box here. And again, we will be recording this, and a video will be made available and will be distributed, or you'll have access to it after the webinar. So can everyone hear me? If they could, please raise your hand, and we'll see if audio is coming across all right. Okay. Looks like we've got some, everyone can hear us all right? Yep, great, great. All right, see lots of folks out there. Awesome. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Moving along past this, got the standard copyright information, moving into the good stuff. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what makes an amazing project management experience. We're going to start with that. We're going to talk about some relevant project management dimensions by industry. Again, this is not meant to be exhaustive. Each of these industry verticals are very large segments of our economy, and they of course have probably every dimension of project management possible that could be of interest to folks in those industries. What we're going to talk about today is some customers that we've worked with. We're not going to call them by name, but just in general, some of the solutions we've done with these types of customers in healthcare, manufacturing, and government. And it's even going to be segmented into specific areas, of course, of those very broad industries and some dimensions of project management and project management information systems, decision support systems around that. Then we will have a QA and wrap-up. We'd like to make this interactive. We're going to challenge you guys with a few quick questions, some polls that will be out there, and we will have an opportunity at the end, again, for some Q&A. If you guys do have questions during, please feel free to post them into the chat window. We've got some colleagues of mine that are on here that will try to answer them real time. If they can't, then we'll save those for the end. So, who's on the call today? The person doing the talking would be that guy on the left. That's me, Mike Taylor. I'm the president and founder of Innovative E. Been practicing project portfolio management solutions for a very long time. We've been dealing with these types of solutions with Innovative E for the past 16 years. I would like to also introduce a few of my colleagues who are on the call. Matt Freilich is our Vice President of Project Portfolio Management and BI. Matt, would you like to say hi?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Mike. So I've been working with Microsoft PPM Stack and SharePoint for over 10 years and been working with Innovative E for the last 6 or so, and been helping architect innovative ways of doing project management using the Microsoft PPM Stack.
Very good. Thanks, Matt. And we have Owen Callan on as well. Owen, would you like to say hi?
Yeah, sure, Mike, thanks. Hi, everybody. My background, not only as a practitioner using Microsoft projects dating back probably 20 years at this point, is also as a trainer and helping people understand how to use the tool. So if you have any questions on how to apply anything that we talk about today, by all means, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Owen. So again, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk through things that make an amazing project management experience for a few different industries. This is, again, is an overview first of a 4-part series. We will drill down into each of the industry solutions that we talk about in additional webinars that will be forthcoming. We will have a schedule that will be on our website. We don't have all of them scheduled yet, but they'll be forthcoming over the next couple months. So this slide right here is actually a poll we did from a previous webinar where we had about 60 or 70 people on, I think, and we asked what makes for an amazing project management experience. And what was pretty interesting is that the vast majority of the folks came up and said, well, it's really all about providing value. So it was almost 65%, 64% there. So between that and making project work easier, you're at 82%. So that's really consistent with what we have found in doing these types of solutions for industries over the years as well. It's really all about the value that it provides to the organization and the stakeholders. So with that, what we'd like to do is we would actually, everybody wake up, we can make sure that you guys are paying attention by challenging you with your first poll. So we're going to open the poll here, and we're going to ask you, what is your most pressing project management challenge? And I'm going to open the poll right now. The poll should be open. Are you guys seeing it? Owen, can you let me see? You guys see the poll? Because all I see is the inside screen here. So what is your most pressing project management challenge? Is it resource management?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I am not seeing the poll. I don't know if others are, but I'm not.
Okay, let me try this right here.
Now
okay.
I am. Now I do. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. All right. So looks like some folks are responding here. Again, we'll give you about a few seconds here, maybe up to about a minute. So is it resource management in terms of resource utilization and resource issues that you're running into and managing your project? Is it intake and demand management in terms of how you are analyzing, the new demand for projects into the portfolio against what you already have in work and in flight? Is it schedule management, cost management, or something else? So it looks like a lot of answers are still coming in here. Give you guys a couple more seconds to wrap this up. All right, got about 70% of the folks have voted. Give you guys about another 15 seconds, see if we can get a couple of folks to vote. All right, awesome. Thank you for participating. We've got more, so stay in tune. All right, just a quick bit about Innovative E. We're not going to talk too much about technology today, but we are a Microsoft partner, and as Matt mentioned, we do have competencies in SharePoint and, more importantly to this conversation, project and portfolio management. We also are a partner with PS Plus, which it's a add-on to Microsoft Project, the Microsoft Project PPM suite, and it works with Microsoft Project Server and Microsoft Project Online, and was recently voted at the Worldwide Partner Conference as the Partner of the Year. So that's awesome. We have been a partner with the Project Management Institute for, I don't know, about 8 or 10 years now. We are a registered education provider. So those of you who are here and interested in the PDU that you can get from this, we will give you the information on that afterwards. Pamela will be distributing that information for those who have attended. So one of the core things when we talk about doing these solutions is the balancing act. It seems like no matter what the industry, what the need is, that there's always a set of considerations that are in balance. And one of the things that seems to be key is that your executives are always looking for dashboards, right? They're always wanting more information. There's never enough information for decision support. And in today's environment, surprisingly, there's still an amazing amount of project management information that's not in a consolidated and centralized location. It's oftentimes in spreadsheets and emails and various Microsoft project plans or other types of tools, cloud-based tools, it doesn't matter. Getting it into one place is a key consideration. And one of the things that the executives are really looking for is transparency. They're really looking to find out what is going on in a more real-time type fashion so that their decisions can be more effective. The converse of that, the bottom-up consideration from the users, is adoption. So a lot of people have seen these systems implemented, or people try to implement systems, and one of the key problems is how much overhead it adds to the job of the users, the project managers, everything else. So when you see that folks are having a hard time using the system, it actually can diminish the effectiveness of the system. So we've come up with kind of a high-level formula that says the value that you get out of it, and remember that value is scored as one of the highest things that folks see as making an amazing experience, but the value you get out of it is really a function of transparency and adoption. So if you build a system where you've got a transparency of 10, for instance, on a scale of 1 to 10, but you've got an adoption of 0 because no one's using it, then you're really not getting any value out of it. So it's key to be able to balance the transparency and the adoption when you build a project management information system. So let's go back to the poll we just did, and let's pencil in the results. So for the various areas we asked you guys to rate in the poll, let's see, we came up with resource management being 42%, intake and demand management at 32%, schedule management at 16%, cost management at 11%, and I guess we captured all the dimensions in there because this came out to be 0%. So thank you all for participating, and we will revisit another question in a few minutes that will help quantify which industry you guys are in.
I just realized, Mike, as we're looking at the results here, we left off a leg of the triangle now that PMI is using, and that's the leadership aspect of it. So I'd be curious, not asking the group now, but if we were to go back and redo the poll and ask something about changes in priorities, whether or not that might come out to match the others just as much.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. So moving forward, looking at what we're going to delve into a little bit today, and we're really going to talk to these solutions that we've seen by industry. And again, these are just narrow slices, but we see these recurring themes that these seem to bubble up, at least in our experience, for these different industries that we have done solutions for. So for healthcare, one of the things we're going to examine a little bit is resource utilization and large program management. For manufacturing, we're going to look at factory and outage management, which really a key component of that is schedule management, integrated schedules. For government, we're going to look at a little bit of integrated master schedule and investment tracking and trending information. So those seem to be some areas that are relevant by the industries that we've worked with. We, of course, have worked with multiple other dimensions of project management in these industries, but these are some that seem to bubble to the top. Also seem to be obviously things that in our survey just now, folks were interested in. So we're going to do another quick survey. Keep everybody on their toes. So this one's going to say, what is the industry that your organization is? And of course, I don't expect that everybody on the call will fall in these three, but if you're in government, which would include federal, state, and local, etc., and if you happen to be in higher ed, I would put it under government. We kind of see those folks kind of trend together in solutions. The healthcare industry or manufacturing or other, and I am going to open up a poll now and launch it, and it should be open.
I can see it.
Awesome, thank you. I'm seeing folks respond now, getting some good response.
So what if they're in pharmaceuticals? Does that count as healthcare or manufacturing?
That is a great question. I would probably put it as healthcare for now, but manufacturing, it's certainly an overlap there. Awesome. So we'll give everybody another minute here. Looks like we've got about 70% have voted. So again, what industry do you align with best, your organization? Government, healthcare, manufacturing, or other? Getting a fair number of others, so we'll have to examine that a little bit more when we get to that point. Awesome. Okay. Well, still a couple folks voting. Give them a couple more seconds, And
So while we're waiting for the results to finish tabulating there, finish voting, if you just marked yourself as an other, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat window what generally you consider your industry to be, that would be very helpful for us to structure the balance of what we share with you. Thank you.
awesome. Thanks, Owen. Yeah, it's a very large percentage of other, so we'll get back to that in a second. So now we're going to start going into, again, we're approaching this from a top-down perspective of how you build project management information systems, and of course we've done this in a lot of different industries. This is still a generic approach. We'll get into some of the industry-specific components in a minute, but one of the things that we see is, as always, when you build a system, and everyone knows this, it's always a balance of your people, your processes, and your technology. One of the reasons we list technology first is because if you already know the platform you're going to use, or if you make a product selection, then there are technology considerations that need to be taken in that need to be used as part of when you balance your requirement against how you're going to go build your processes and your training for your folks. You don't want to be fighting the technology. So you really have to understand the depth and breadth of what the technology can do before you actually go out and build the processes around it and configure the technology to build the solutions. But what we're going to do now is we're going to share with you some of our kind of best practices that we found that really go into how you best build these solutions. So again, on the technology we work with is the core Microsoft Project Portfolio Management Suite, the platform with Project Plus, PS Plus, and some customizations that we do on top of it. One key thing that we do that is different than folks have done in the past is we really look at focus configuration, navigation options, etc. We make sure that we don't try to provide everything that a tool can do or a platform can do out of the box. What you really want to do is you really want to say, what is the absolute minimum that you need to do to accomplish a set of business requirements, and then configure the tool to keep people focused on that. And we'll circle back to that when we get to the people and processes piece as well. You also want to reserve your custom development as your last resort. And one of the things that we've seen in both SharePoint and project deployments and other technologies as well is folks will often look at something, and this goes back to whether or not you're trying to fight the tool or trying to use the tool as it's designed, is they'll say, well, this doesn't work exactly like our business requirements, or this isn't exactly like what we think it should look like, and they'll want to go to start developing things on top of it. That's fine if you've really exhausted everything that you can do. If you haven't exhausted everything you can do with the technology and you go directly to custom dev, you have to understand that you're paying a price for that, not just up front, but any custom code that you build on top of these solutions has to be maintained over time. So it adds to your cost and complexity up front, and it adds to your cost over time. So when it comes to the processes, we really look at how you purpose-build the processes by role, and again, they also map into the technology. We talk about the focus configuration, navigation, etc. You really can think about it like every single role has its own set of processes that are built and then configured against the technology. And then try to simplify the processes to the absolute minimum required to accomplish each iteration. These solutions tend to be born and then grow over time. Each iteration that you do, you need to try to simplify to what is absolutely minimum required for that iteration. And the reason for doing that is you can easily get into process analysis paralysis, and people start arguing over this or that from a process perspective, and you tend not to get much done in that perspective. So moving on to the people component, we really encourage buy-in via systematic communications. This oftentimes in large organizations means working closely with your corporate communications organization, existing communication structures that are in place, intranets, everything else, making sure that people really understand the what and why of why you're building these systems, and what the value is, coming back to that value statement, what the value is to the organization so people feel bought in. Back to the, you talked about the focus navigation. Now when you talk about the training, we really encourage laser-focused, role-based, and function-based training so that you're really not trying to teach everybody every dimension of project management, everything that you possibly could do with this type of system, everything that there is to know. Really, when you talk about adoption, what will get adoption the best is to teach people the minimum of what they need to do to get the job done and stay focused on that, so that will add the least overhead to their job. Lastly, for the people, you have to build a support structure. You have to have people that they can go to, whether they're power users, a technology vendor, somebody who can help give them the support they need to do their job. Obviously, you need job aids and ongoing things. Sometimes with project management systems, there's certain functions that may only be done on a weekly or monthly basis. It's hard to remember. Training is not a great way to have people, built to or understand how to do things that are not frequently done unless you can provide additional structure and job aids. So keep that in mind. Okay, going back to the poll, and this is actually pretty interesting. So government, we have 19%. And healthcare, we have 24%. In manufacturing, we have 10%. And then in other, we have 48%. So almost half of everyone is in other. So, and you had asked that folks post into the chat window what other field they might be in. Are we getting any responses?
I haven't seen any response there so far.
Okay.
But my guess would be it's services of some kind or another.
Yeah, that's the fourth category that we see a lot is professional services or contracting of some form.
We actually have one person in financial services and one person in media and advertising.
Oh, okay. Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, well, for those of you who aren't specifically in these, which it looks like it's about 48%, I think there's still going to be a lot of good value to what we're going to show you here. And then, of course, we may actually tailor our series a little bit to broaden up beyond these three as well. So going into the healthcare, some of the common challenges that we see in the healthcare industry, and most of the customers we've dealt with for the type of solution we're going to talk about today are really not on the provider side, they're more on the insurance and processing side. So those industries, as the 24% of you who are here know that they're kind of split, it's at least into major categories like that. So what we see is large-scale IT projects and programs, and these projects and programs can be millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in scale and run multiple years. And as such, they have very large resource requirements across these enterprises. So resource utilization and getting the right people assigned to them and then managed over time as scope and timelines change and all the interdependencies with all the other work these resources are doing become a really critical component of what they're doing. The other thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is how the project intake, prioritization, and selection works. So when you're really looking at, you've got this huge portfolio of programs and projects, how do you balance new initiatives that come up, whether or not it's a new business initiative, it's a new compliance initiative, or a change even to a large, or an addition to a large program or project, and how you balance that with your selection going forward. So with that, actually we've got a few screenshots here, but I think it's going to be the architect of some of these solutions, Matt, who is on, you guys have already met, is going to talk a little bit about each of these. So the format will be the same. We'll go through the same format for each of these three industries. So Matt, do you mind saying a few words about this industry and what we've seen there and what we've done?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. So some of the challenges that we found in healthcare being that they're such big organizations and very spread across the country in terms of operating locations is that having a good understanding of how the demand upon a particular location or a particular area within the organization is required and how it rolls up. And that's something that Microsoft PPM can help get you to, but then all the other reporting components in terms of the configuration and customization in terms of reporting can add and really grow that component. As you can see on some of these screenshots, one of the things we're looking at is how it rolls up in terms of a department or location and from where the demand is actually originating from, as opposed to what is the request and who is requesting. So it helps out that to understand out how it's rolling up and who is being asked to do the work, and then resource managers can actually go off and assign that appropriately. And it also is we're also showing the utilization of resourcing, so how that component works and where the most of the work is being done. Is it being done as part of a PTO, or is it being done as part of a core project versus client versus funded projects versus compliance or government required projects type deal, so they can start to see how that actually rolls up, and then they can see where their resources are being utilized across the different types of funding. But then the other big thing that they had was really understanding demand and how that rolls in. So getting all their projects in terms of what is being asked for from the various locations is a challenge in and of itself. So we have to get all the projects not just on Excel sheets or in emails and everything else, but all the ideas to get in there so we can make an accurate decision and make an informed decision and make sure we're all talking about the same thing, which is definitely a challenge for large organizations such as a healthcare IT. And again, we're focusing on the big, large-scale IT projects, not like a clinician inside of a hospital. So if we move on to the next slide here, how to show the executives the transparency and visibility. You're going to see the same theme throughout some of the other verticals we're talking about as well. But understanding how to get access to the data and rolling it up in terms of projects and showing where the status is, what all the proposed projects are in the system, what are the various indicators for that industry, for that organization, and how that rolls up to show, what's the baseline finish date, what's the current finish date, is there a go live for this application, how is that looking, and how does the notification from the project manager roll into this as well? Like, hey, we're doing really well, but something's not going, but we're behind schedule for whatever reason. So all of that can be rolled up neatly into a nice report where it can be handed to your executive. Although Microsoft PPM does a really good job of having a unified project center, and it adds all that together, it's really hard to have convince executives to go digging around throughout the system. So a way to get them the data that they want to get into in a fast, easy, consumable fashion is generally what we see as the best way to get that transparency to the entire organization.
Okay, so thanks, Matt, and we're going to roll through each of the three areas in the same similar fashion. So within the manufacturing space, one of the dimensions we talked about is looking at heavy manufacturing. So we're talking about large-scale industry. It could be a big plant, a manufacturing plant of some form, where they're really looking at better decision support for an outage management. It can be a capital improvement, it can be maintenance, it can be both. Typically those are tied together and many times. So one of the big challenges that they run into also in these types of scenarios is that the information is not even close to real time. You've got a lot of different folks with a lot of information. As you get close to the outage, they're saying you've got your maintenance engineers, your planners, your different job folks all saying this is the kind of work that we need to do, and there can literally be thousands of these different jobs that have to be coordinated and cross-coordinated throughout the management of the outage. And so these things take on a life of their own, and if you don't have real-time information, you can't make good decisions on where the issue is and what you need to do about it. And so there's these thousands of interlinked jobs. Schedule and critical path analysis becomes a critical component of that to really understand real-time where things are and what kind of decisions can be made to correct issues that are in work. And there's also other types of reporting pieces, and Matt will talk a little bit more about that as well, that we see become pretty important to do as far as other critical information that they're looking to manage. So with that, Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about the outage management?
Sure, I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you for the lead in there. So as Mike was talking about, transparency is, again, it's going to the same themes we find through all the verticals. It's just how is the problem solved is slightly different. So again, transparency is very important here. So the key for the transparency we're talking about here is not necessarily just access to the data, it's access to the data that's near real time. And what we notice with some of the manufacturing companies is that we're working not just with the IT, we're actually working with like the engineering side of the house with the manufacturing. So we have a lot of people that are actually out there working on the machines, working on the components of their lifeblood, right? So the furthest thing from their mind was actually going to a computer and putting in some updates. So we had to make this simple enough that it could be used quickly, easily, and done in a fashion where the supervisors that are people who are closest to the jobs are out there understanding what's going on could put the updates in a very quick fashion. So, and still have relatively near real-time information. So we're looking at a dashboard that's saying, here's everything that's going on, percent complete, where the things are moving forward, where things are behind, what area of the organization is behind, where things are moving smoothly, and in addition to, are we behind schedule overall, or we should be further along than when we plan to be, we are right now. And it kind of bubbles that all up in a very easy to consume dashboard for an executive without having to know a lot about what the details of the schedule mean. They can see exactly how well things are moving along. But then you also have the other transparency component on here, which is, lockout, tagout. Very industry term across several, basically anybody who's doing some sort of OSHA standard work where they need to make sure the machines are locked out and then tagged out in some fashion and very documented. Well, the process is something that the manufacturers understand and do really well. The utilization of the data is something that we found to be some challenging. So during some of these outages that were being run, we found that knowing when a machine is ready to be worked on, or when a machine is done being worked on, it can be put back into service or locks taken off, was generally done by emails and phone calls. So we were able to generate a way to make that more automated and a very efficient way of looking at it, and you can get the information by the same data set that's driving the dashboard.
Yeah, that's very good. And just to add on to that point, I think a lot of what you end up doing here is building ways, and they're fairly simplistic ways, but they're very effective, where folks who are not having to use some of the more complex components of the tools are able to get the information they need very quickly. So like the executives can see these dashboards and these reports just by going to a web page. There's not a lot of additional training and everything else. I mean, literally when we train executives these kind of things, it's 15 minutes of here's how you find your information, and that's it. There's no additional work that's required there. So thanks, Matt.
So on the next slide we have the adoption side. So this is really where we had to focus a lot of our time as well for these customers. So in the Microsoft PPM, they have some pre-built ways of doing some really nice stuff, but it can be very difficult to navigate. So we've actually tried to ensure that navigation is simple, so you're not having to go in and deal with the noise. You're just getting in there, doing the stuff that you expect to do, doing what you're trained on there. So we try to make the training not just here's how to use the entire suite of Microsoft PPM. We focus more the training on, and the user guides that come with it, or the one-pagers that you see in a screenshot here, are intended to focus solely on here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, you're done. We want things to be fast, easy, and quick to work with, so you don't have to. This can be just a means to an end versus every time I have to be confused by what I'm doing, and it then doesn't get adopted, doesn't get done, and then the data isn't flowing, and then the executives are upset, and you start working down the various levels of problems that occur from the simplicity not being there.
Right,
and
further.
Go ahead.
And that goes back to the whole transparency and adoption making up the overall value, which everybody rated very high, right?
Right. One of the other things so in order to ensure that the ease of use is there, is we created an app that goes into the system, or an add-in if you're using Microsoft terminology very specifically, to ensure that it's a dashboard for the people updating the data is very simple and easy to use. They can figure out what's current, what's overdue, what's coming up, and what's completed in some easy to use tabs. There's security trimming around it to ensure that the supervisors can drill down into what they want them to see versus what they don't want them to see, and they can get access to. So if somebody were to be, say, working on a piece of hardware and they're gone, they're sick, they had to leave for an emergency for the day, there's still somebody who can override and put the updates in without having to go into Microsoft Project to do this work. So it's just an easy to use, simple dashboard that can have the time and date down to the minute if necessary.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the folks find that really easy to use. And again, these are folks that are very busy. So, one of the values that provides is they are able to spend a lot more time working in the field and not near as much time compiling reports, entering information. Okay, the last vertical we're going to look at is government. And as Matt said, there's common themes to all these industries. One of the themes here is lack of visibility in larger scale programs and projects. Integrated master schedules are disparate and not tied together. So there's a lot of folks with a lot of different types of tools that they're using, a lot of Microsoft Project and project type tools on the desktop. A lot of information lives on network shares or on SharePoint sites. It can be in emails and PowerPoints, and it's very not real time. There's not a single source of truth. And with these large interdependencies, trying to get these things to where, again, executives and agency managers and directors, etc., can make good, informed decisions is very difficult and very time delayed. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt to talk about some of the solutions-based things that we've done to help people in this space.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So some of the things that we've seen challenges around is the integrated master schedules. As we all know, government has a lot of different contractors and vendors working on various things that are all kind of interrelated, and these are like several year projects, right? So some of the challenges around this is, well, how do I figure out what's going on? How do I figure out if this project is slipping or is delayed? Is it because the vendor is having an issue, or is it because another vendor is slipping and the project's running late, which means this project's going? So some of the stuff we've done is trying to show the variance and how the interaction between the different projects that are going on causes the various contracting components and vehicles to have better conversations around, do we refund this project when the option year is up? If we don't, what are we going to do? What's the hit? Are we going to lose a whole bunch of work, or do we take a risk and move on to a different vendor or a different type of project, or cancel it? So they have the more visibility into this information because it's all in the same location and because everyone's kind of following some level of standardization, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But the dashboarding components of this is incredibly important because it's all interactive. So it allows the managers and executives to get to the dashboard, get to the data they want to see, filter on stuff, and basically slice and dice the data that they're presented with in a fashion that works for them. So they could find out how many projects or how many portfolios are in a red status, and and hover over, find that out, drill in, and all the data changes to focus on those projects. And you could even see, well, over time, how does that trend? I could have a project or a portfolio that is running behind right now, but if I were to look at it in more detail, it was actually green 6 months ago. So what happened? Was there a change? Was there something that wasn't updated? Was there something that wasn't bubbled up to the top that we should have had a conversation about sooner? So again, it's rolling it up, it's having that access to the trending information and understanding the interactivity of the dashboards and figuring out how to best make decisions based off the project because they're all in the same bucket.
Yep, very good.
So talking further about standardization, we found with several of our government clients is that because there's a lot of vendors, a lot of different primes, a lot of different folks in the different agencies, we find that the project maturity of the organization as a whole might be a little on the lower side. So trying to make sure everybody's at least walking the same path, not necessarily understanding how to put together a schedule or on how or manage a project, but as a whole, we need everybody at least talking the same language, following the same path. So we were able to put together templates and standardized project templates and project sites, so everyone at least was putting everything in the same places, following the same rules. That also carries over into the status reporting, making sure everybody was putting the same verbiage, or not the same, excuse me, not the same verbiage, but the same information or type of information in the project schedule. So we had executive summaries that would allow for a project manager to roll up contextual-based updates that showed up in the status report, but we had a simple place to put that for them as opposed to it being in different places, email, Excel, or different formatting, so we were able to control the formatting of that type of stuff, along with access to data like cost data is something that's a challenge as well. So we know that and we understand it. So in the beginning, we were able to work with KPIs that are self-attested. So the project manager or contracting manager or whoever that was in charge of setting some of these KPIs could go into the project and set them themselves based off the information that they've collected or they understand it to be. It's not calculated, but it could work you towards the route of being calculated. So it kind of helps down that path of growing the maturity and the standardization at the same time.
Right, so it allows the amount of rigidity that the customer wants to it kind of put onto their folks, right?
Right.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thanks, Matt. I think with that, we're going to move into the last major component here. It's really just one slide. One of the things that we put into the abstract for this webinar is really what is the framework for sustainable adoption. We've touched on a couple of these points before, but we'll talk about them really quickly again. Then we will open this up for some Q&A. So anyone who's got some questions and you want to start putting them into the question window, go ahead and feel free to start doing that now. And we'll go through this last couple slides here. So what is a good framework for building a project management information system or systems that have good sustainability over time? Because we all know that if you launch something, it doesn't mean that it's going to continue to survive and thrive and provide the value that you want to do it over time. So key components are, again, this goes back to the balancing act, the project management, the project managers and the end users' ease of use and ability to do it. That's going to foster adoption at the grassroots level. The converse of that is continually providing executive value and transparency, and this is something that we find is not a one-shot deal, that once you build these things, they're going to continue to want more, and you're going to have to continue to think of ways, and they will continue to think of ways to make this more robust for them over time so that they can continue to get better transparency. And oftentimes, as Matt was saying, sometimes that means that you start with something that's like self-attested, so somebody can flip an indicator, say, yeah, the cost is okay, to, hey, we need to actually hook it up to a system now and grab that information from a different system, consolidate it, make sure it's aligned date-wise, schedule-wise, the cost information, whatever it is you're trying to do, and then provide that additional component of transparency for good decision support. And so you see that kind of expansion of systems over time. And that goes into this other piece, which is an innovation roadmap. It's critical, we found, to build a backlog, a roadmap of things that you're trying to work to. These are aspirational systems that will continue to grow over time so long as they continue to build on the value proposition that they're giving to their organization. So you need to always have what's next, what's coming up next down the road, so we can continue to say, all right, what are the things that we're working on, whether it's expanding the system by adding additional users to it, it's increasing enhancing the system with additional functionality, need to be looking at that roadmap and building on that. And then the fourth pillar of that is change control and governance. And we can't emphasize enough, once these systems are built, the importance of change control and governance. The change control process needs to be documented, needs to be followed, and the more mature the system gets and the more usage it gets and the more value people are getting out of it, the more important it is that you have good change control and governance so that changes aren't being made without folks understanding what's about to happen that affect other folks, that you're able to make sure that you're providing some stability, because one of the key or a core thing that will undermine belief and trust in the system is when you have instability or things seemingly change without understanding why. So it's very important that you build those kinds of things around it as well. So with that, I think the next steps that we talked about, there's going to be 3 more webinars. We're going to focus a little deeper dive. Those will actually get into demonstrating some of the solutions. We didn't have time to do that today, but we will do that in the future in those additional webinars. And those series are TBD, so you can check our website. We'll also be emailing out to all the folks who registered for this one what those additional ones will be and when they will be. And the presentation was recorded, as we talked about, and will be provided by an email. Pamela will be sending that out to everyone later today. The PDU information for those PMPs who need their PDUs will be provided by email. The deck and email will also be available on our website within 24 hours. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions that we don't answer here. And of course, we'll have additional discounts for any attendees for today's, for anything that you guys might want that we might be able to provide for you. So with that, I think, unless there's anything else, we would like to open it up for some Q&A. I'm not seeing anything in the panel at the moment. Does anybody?
There's nothing in either the chat window or the question pane at this point.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask us real quick? We'll stick around for a few more minutes and see if there's any questions that pop in. Owen, did you have anything you wanted to add or any ideas?
Just to reiterate how broad each of these categories that we covered today can be, the healthcare, the manufacturing, and the governments, they can take on so many different shapes and flavors within each of those sectors. For instance, within the healthcare, we brought up pharmaceuticals that could also fit into manufacturing, depending upon what your role is there. Or it could be clinical trials, which would have a bit of the services element that would fit into 48% of where the other folks are. So I really do encourage folks that were looking for a little bit more detail on any one of the particular verticals to come on into the subsequent webinars that we're planning. Because there's so much to explore in each one of those. I think you can benefit from those.
I see that Brett said no questions for him. You're welcome, Brett.
Yes, thank you, Brett.
You're welcome, Cheryl. Okay, looks like that's going to be it then. So if anyone has any further questions, again, you've got the contact information. We'll leave the screen up for another minute or two, and then you guys will be getting all the additional information. So thank you very much, and have an awesome day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.